So good day, my name is Jet, and for my final individual project, I will be discussing modeling pandemics and epidemics. So before moving on to the discussion, I would like to define two terms first. So first term is model. Model means in this context is a system of postulates, data, and inferences presented as a mathematical description of an entity or state of affairs. Whereas pandemic means that it's an occurring over a wide geographic area and typically affecting a significant proportion of the population. So in this slide, in the following slides, we are going to discuss the purposes of mathematical models. But first, let's ask, what are models for? So basically, a mathematical model is a research method that helps us guide in our decisions by creating a system that shows us data the way we purpose it for. So models provide first the understanding of disease dynamics. Second is that it evaluates potential control strategies. Third is that it predicts future outbreaks. So before we move on to the in-depth discussions of mathematical modeling, we must first understand that with basic mathematical models, researchers can begin to forecast the progression of diseases and understand the effect of interventions on disease spread by Yates 2020. So think about it. With the COVID-19 pandemic that is going on, models are necessary in mitigating the damages brought by the virus. So for example, in this situation that we are now, we're in the COVID-19 pandemic. So its necessity is really high. We now have the in-depth discussion regarding the topic modeling of the pandemic and epidemics. So first, we should discuss what these models are. So mathematical modeling comes with computer simulations. This represents how a disease is spread in virtual spaces. So with this computer simulations, it allows researchers to run trials of real-world scenarios. So now let's take a look at how these models are made. So this is by a step-by-step process. We will discuss it on the next slides. So the first step in creating a model is to we should ask first the question, what are we trying to track? So this could be the COVID virus, or this could be syphilis, anything. So in tracking, we should first decide on a research question. Why? Because first, it will determine the mathematical model used and the data required. Second is that we should identify key biological processes, because in doing so, we understand the natural history of the disease. This includes the transmission and its immunity development. And thirdly, in this first step, is that we abstract the data into a model. An example of this is the transition dynamics model. The model will illustrate how different interventions can affect the spread of the disease. So second step in creating a model is to ask the question, what is the data? So first, we discussed earlier that data are really important in creating these models, because these are what supplies the data, the models rather. So data, quantitative data to be specific, includes these four key things. First are the biological studies of the virus. This includes the researches and academic records regarding the disease. Second are the public health surveillance records. These are data that are collected by public health offices, such as the number of disease, past and present. Thirdly are the health administration records. This refers to the overall well-being of a community, for example, but specifically their data regarding their health standards. Fourth are the results from clinical trials. This could be by vaccines that are being developed, by companies such as Pfizer, Moderna, for COVID-19 context. This also includes not just the vaccines, but are also the pills that are being developed by health companies. So a third step is the application and the study of the model. We will explain why the study of the model is still important, but first, let's look at how these models are applied. So these models are applied most and foremost by doing simulations. So when doing a simulation, these are the first steps that we do. First is we make a base case. So basically a base case is just like a control group of the research where we just collect data and test people. For example, we test COVID-19 patients just once. So this base case, this is what we will compare the models against. So the second thing we do is make a trial. Basically, this is where we apply the model. So in this case, for example, trial A could represent a strategy where screening frequency is higher. For example, applying swab tests for potential carriers every 3 months. So in comparison to this, second different methodology, we make trial B. This could represent another trial in which the methodology is different. For instance, it can be a universal screening that's weekly. So there are lots of different factors that we can consider when doing this sort of trials. So the fourth thing we need to do in doing the simulation, we now get into comparison. So here we compare every trial from each other, especially from the base case. So here we have the base case, and this is just an example. So we have 75% for the base accuracy, and for trial A, we have 80% for the trial accuracy. So this means that since trial A has a higher accuracy, we choose trial A. So in doing so, in interpreting the data, for example, of trial A, since it has better accuracy, decision makers such as policymakers, policy elites, the government, they will have better data. Since they have been given a better model, it is easier for them to make the right decisions. So this means that we would have better allocation of researchers. Why? Because when these officials get the most out of the data, they can allocate health resources more efficiently against the virus. So the last part of this presentation is the long-term plan. So in doing so, models are not entirely perfect. So we should always be aware of these three things. This is what we should do. First is we should always look out for errors. So in doing so, we should always be aware of these models processes, especially new models, because they are more prone to errors. Second is we analyze the model. We find areas where our model may be lacking. Third is a dynamic revision. So specifically in a dire situation like this, such as COVID-19, we should always change our model, adjust parameters, and always stay wary regarding the model's data processes. So we will have more accuracy. This means better government responses. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much. Here are the references.